All right, any discussion about approval of the agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. All right, item number 3 is vote on the approval of the meeting minutes from the December 8th meeting. Any discussion or changes?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes.
Joe Ankeny will abstain since we weren't at November. I wasn't there.
Okay. All right, Mark, thank you. You get that, Tracy?
I got it.
Yes, sir,
Okay.
I did.
All right, thank you. Item number 4 is consent and vote on contract and expenses. And Todd, you want to give us a lowdown of that?
Yep, sure. Next slide. Two items for you. The first item on the expense side is with MMIT. They're our IT department. They also help us with some of our equipment purchases. This is to purchase a new copy machine. The current one, the lease is expiring at the end of February. We're going to purchase a new machine. It'll be a little more cost effective than any lease option that we could procure. So estimated amount is between 10 and 12,000. Just depends on a couple features that we're working out with MMIT. We have the amount budgeted in our hardware budget for this. So I'd recommend approval on that. And then on the contract side, Marion County asked us to help with the zoning code update. And there'll be a $15,000 income into the MPO for staff time to work on that. I'd recommend approval. Be happy to answer any questions.
I have
Any
a,
questions?
I do. This is Stephanie. So Marion County isn't a member of the MPO, correct?
Correct.
So does the MPO often do things like this for entities that are outside of the region, outside of the area?
We have, because it's part of SRPTA. So we've done work with the members of SRPTA before on different things. And this is just sort of one of those add-ons that we do. And as SRPTA staff, it's MPO staff, so.
Okay, and then the last question, Norwalk redid its zoning code several years ago, and I meant to ask this, but I forgot. I thought that we paid a lot more than $15,000 to get that done from a consultant. So are you undercharging for your value of your services?
I guess it could be looked at either way. This is more of an update. It isn't a whole revamp of their whole code. I don't know exactly what Norwalk did. Some of those can be quite pricey when they do a whole rewrite of the whole code.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? Hey, a question, Todd, on the copy machine. Are we going to get more than just one bid from MMIT, or is that?
Yeah, we got a bid from Xerox. We got a bid from LRI and a couple others. This was the best bid that we received.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? I would entertain a motion for item number 4.
Move approval.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 5 is report on fiscal year 2023 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget Development. Dylan?
Yes, thank you. We are working on the update to the 2023 work program and budget. And this is something we do each year. It outlines what our work activities will be, what our costs will be, kind of just the activities and everything that goes along with that. This is, the draft is due April 1st, and then the final is due June 1st. So in March, we'll come back with a draft document for you to approve. We'll send that to the Iowa DOT. They'll get us comments back. And then in May, we'll come back with another request for the final approval from the board. If you go to the next slide, everything that we do for the work program complies with some sort of federal requirement that's put on us. Up there on the screen are a couple of the the requirements that are put upon us, such as developing the work program itself, maintaining the long-range plan, doing our STP process and our transportation improvement program, public participation plan, all those sorts of things. So everything that we put into that work program, we make sure that it complies or somehow builds on those required documents or planning efforts that we have. Go to the next screen, next slide. Just a couple of weeks ago, Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration came out with joint emphasis areas for 2022. So these are somewhat new. I don't believe they've come out with these in the past, or at least not with direction to put these into our work program. So these are things that we'll have to show how we are, working towards these things. A lot of these are similar to some of the newer efforts that were put into the recent transportation bill that was passed late last year. So things like climate change, equity, complete streets, data in transportation. These are all sort of newer trends and themes. So we'll just have to make sure that we're doing something to show that we're working towards those and, advancing the federal, what they want to see done there.
So will you, Dylan, not to interrupt you, but will you add that into the scoring process now with adding some of these new criterias in there?
That's a good question. We haven't discussed that from a scoring perspective yet. We were going to more so put these in for, what are we doing as an organization in terms of our projects and things like that. But I think that is something we would want to consider is how do we, put these into scoring. That's a good point.
Will we have a further discussion of what the policy committee wants to do with some of these new criteria that they put out?
Yeah, definitely. So what we're working on now is just putting together the work program, and we can walk through. So next month, I hope to have more of a draft work program for you to see what all the projects and all those kind of things are. And then we can have a discussion of, do you like these things? Do you not like these things? As I'll get on to the next slide, we are requesting proposals from member governments now, what kind of projects they want to see and all that. So once we have all that brought forward, both what we receive from the local governments and our members, as well as what we as staff foresee that we need to do, then that's when we'll have discussion, and we can have discussion any other time too. But that's really when we'll have that discussion of what goes into the work program. How are we complying with these? Do we want to? A lot of these we should do it. They're emphasis areas, not required to do it necessarily. So that's where we can have that discussion, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And a follow-up onto that, Joe, then how is that then proactively being communicated out, to communities that would be putting forth project proposals for consideration, well in advance? If that is going to be built into the criteria.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, I would say for this year, we've already requested projects. We'll have an item on that for the SCP projects later. So we're probably working with what we have already for this year, or for future years, SDBG projects. That's where we want to make changes if we want to do that for scoring.
And we did share this with the technical committee, and then we're also waiting really on more details from the DOT and Federal Highway on what exactly all these new items mean to them and how they want us to implement them. So it's a bit of chicken and egg thing going on here, but we'll work through it and bring you back more detail.
Yeah.
Okay.
One final thing for me, like I said, we're soliciting these projects and ideas, whatever, from our communities now. We're also working on the budget side of things. So with the recent transportation bill, we are receiving additional funding, both for project side of things, and that's still kind of to be determined. It won't happen just yet. But for just the MPO operations, the planning funds that we receive, those are going to go up by about $215,000 or so. So that's additional funding that we have to, program into our budget. Also, some of the things like we just approved the contract for Madison or Marion County. There's other contracts that we've got going and we've had going over the years. We'll just have to figure out how to all those things work together. So we're working on that budget side of things now. We'll soon be meeting with the finance subcommittee just to make sure they're comfortable with everything. And that'll be all part of the stuff we bring back next month as we continue to look at more of a final or more of a draft product, I should say, before it gets approved for the DOT's review.
So Dylan, on this change in criteria with climate change and equity and justice, transportation planning, Is this a situation where the federal government can deny us funds if we don't meet what they're wanting? And how are they defining that? How are they scoring that on their end as to whether we're meeting what they envision?
Yeah, so every 4 years we're reviewed by the federal government. And we just did that last year, I believe, Todd, 2020, right? Or was it 2021? Anyway, we just did that in the last year. So it'll be a couple of years before we are reviewed again. Like Todd said, a lot of these things are so new that we haven't seen the final language of what's actually expected of us, if it's encouraged but not required, those kind of things. And that all plays into that certification review that we go through. When we do those certification reviews, they just look through everything we do. And if it's a requirement, they really make sure that we're doing it and we can be penalized if we aren't doing it. If it's just encouraged, they'll see if we're doing it, they'll encourage us to do it, but it's not required. So they can't really make us do it. If we were in a situation where we weren't in compliance with something that's required, they would just tell us we need to fix it. They wouldn't be like automatically we start losing funds. There'd be a window of time in which we have to bring our stuff up to standards before anything like that would happen. We've never been in a situation like that. So I'd say that's probably unlikely, but just to answer your question, that's kind of how that process works.
So will we know in advance before we create our own criteria, what their criteria for what they're wanting?
Change it. Yeah, we'll know. There's some things we're already working on, so I don't think we're going to be out of line, but we're not going to go super in depth and create something without really having a lot of guidance from what they're wanting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this? I think otherwise that's all I have for you today.
Okay. Thanks, Dylan. Great questions. Anybody else have anything else to add? All right. We will move on to item number 6, which is just a report on the election of calendar year 2022 officers. Todd, you want to tackle this since Bob's not here?
Yeah, we're working on a slate of officers for the committee, or for the exec committee, especially given some of the changes at the county level. So the proposed slate of officers, and this will be a voting item next month. Right now is Bob Andwig as chair, Stephanie as vice chair, and then Ted as secretary treasurer. The committee looked at a lot of different things, tried to have some balance on geography, and then also just moving Bob up in the slot since he was secretary treasurer, and then would have moved to vice chair this year, but we had what happened happen. So that's the slate. Be happy to answer any questions. Proposed slate.
Yeah, Todd, this is Russ Trimble from West Des Moines. Glad to be back with you guys in the MPO. Can we take a separate vote on Weaver?
All right, Trimble.
It's already starting.
I had to get that in, Ted. Sorry.
It is starting. I like it. Welcome aboard, Russ. I didn't know you were on.
Yeah, sorry, I joined late. Good to be with you guys again. Thank you, Joe.
You bet. Any other questions or comments? Todd, I think it's a good slate, and I think those three will do very, very well. We've got some experience, and I'm happy to turn it over to Bob after next month.
Yep, sounds good.
Just one thing, if I could add, Mr. Chair, is we are reaching out to all the cities and all the member governments and reminding them to get us their representatives if they have not already. And then we're working through the process to get the sub-area members for the new executive meeting too. So we do have Russ and Mark and some others from the cities that have dedicated representatives to the executive committee. But the sub areas, those communities under 50,000, they are selected from a pool, within their sub areas. So there's 3 sub areas. So anyway, we're working through that process. So hopefully by the time this vote takes place and everything, we will have all that squared away. But just to give you an update on where we're at with that.
Okay. Do you think we'll have that by the policy meeting on Thursday?
I'd really like for us to.
Well, I would hope that we were able to give everybody kind of a sense that that's been taken care of and it's done.
Yeah, we're making calls and following up with the ones that we haven't heard from. So
Okay. Okay, all good things. Anybody else have anything to add? All right, we'll move on to item number 7, which is a report on fiscal year 2026 surface transportation block grant application. Zach?
Yes, thank you. So the applications for federal fiscal year 2026 SDBG funding were due on January 7th. Next slide, please. Thank you. In total, we received 12 applications. I've got them kind of broken out there on the screen before you. We had 5 that were submitted in the system capacity category, 4 under major reconstruction and replacement, and then we had 1 each for the bridge category, the system optimization category, and the transit category. The total request this year is about $24.5 million. We're probably going to have, we haven't got our final numbers from the DOT yet, but probably somewhere around $13 million to award out in federal fiscal year 2026. Communities we received applications from included Altoona, Ankeny, Clive, Dart, Des Moines, Grimes, Waukee, West Des Moines, and Windsor Heights. Next slide, please. This kind of talks about STP set aside, so I'll let Aspen go over that.
Thanks, Zach. So we also had our TAP applications due on January 7th, and we received 4 applications from Polk County, City of Des Moines, City of West Des Moines, and Windsor, or City of Ankeny, I believe. And all 4 of those projects that were submitted are trail and shared use path projects, and the total requested funds were $3,500,000. So we'll get those scored internally with staff, and then we will set them with the funding subcommittee and award some funds to these projects.
All right, thanks, Aspen. Next slide.
Zach, Aspen, how much money is available, do you think, for TAP awards this year?
Zach might be better at answering that. I think we won't know for sure until February, right? But it was maybe around 1.3 million total, we were thinking.
Yeah, roughly somewhere in that range.
Okay, thank you.
As far as the timeline moving forward goes, we've set a date for the applicant presentations. Those will occur on February 24th in the morning. I think we've got it blocked off from 9:30 to 12:30. Based on the number of applications, we probably won't need that full time block, but we'll be developing the schedule and sending that out here shortly. Following that meeting, the funding subcommittee will reconvene sometime probably in early middle March to develop their recommendation for funding. And then that recommendation will go on to the committees in April and May for final approval. Be happy to answer any questions you have. This is just a report, let you know what applications we received. We'll be discussing this more at future meetings.
Thanks, Zach. Anybody have any other questions for Zach? All right, we'll move on to item number 8 is a report on the priority project list for the annual DC trip. Hopefully we'll be able to attend this May, and love to hear some of the priorities.
So staff has been working with communities to develop the annual priority project list for the Greater Moines Partnership trip. The funding subcommittee will review this list at their March meeting that I mentioned earlier. The list that we have updated was provided to you in your agenda on page 11. There are a number of changes on there. We basically took the list from last year, sent it out to the communities, and requested that they provide us with any updates to the existing projects on the list, as well as providing us with any new projects that they would like to include. So again, on page 11 is the list. Overall, there are 22 projects that were submitted to us. Again, most of these are ones that have been on the list before that you're familiar with. Some of them just updated their total project costs or, changed their project description slightly. Everything shown in red on that draft list are things that changed. There were a handful of projects that were added in as new projects. I know Indianola added a few projects. Norwalk added a new project, Windsor Heights added a new project, and I believe the city of Urbandale also added a new project. Other than that, it was all projects that were included on last year's list with just some minor updates to descriptions and costs. Again, we'll be taking this to the funding subcommittee. We sent it out to the tech committee to review and make sure that everybody had the projects they wanted included on there. Yeah, we'll have a recommendation from the funding subcommittee following March as to which projects will move forward on the list. I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thanks, Zach. Any questions? Comments? All right, we'll move on to item number 9, which is a report on the Purple Heart Highway update from Todd.
The DOT continues to meet with stakeholders. That's probably the main update. They met with a couple of communities along the corridor before the holidays and intend to pick it back up after the holidays. So they should be getting me some new dates, hopefully this week, that we can reach out to, I believe, Altoona and Carlisle haven't met. They met with Pleasant Hill and Norwalk before the holidays. So we'll get that done. The DOT then plans to sort of write a summary report of their findings and talking with all the stakeholders, not only the communities, but other groups that are interested in this or have an interest in the interstate conversion. And then we'll continue moving forward with the process. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Todd? We know what any of the feedback they've been getting, Todd, at all? Have they given you any hints of how things have gone? Is it supportive? Is it, we don't want to do this, or what do you think?
I think everybody's been fairly supportive. Obviously, the communities are supportive. The farm community mainly just wants to maintain the status quo as far as their access to the facility. But they don't have a problem with the conversion itself as long as they can continue to use the facility. So I don't see any huge roadblocks from that side.
Okay. Anybody
Joe?
else have any? Go ahead.
I do, and this is Stephanie. One thing I thought was very interesting out of the meeting with Norwalk was that it was said that the weight restrictions might be something that isn't handled by legislation, but is handled on a national basis by the Federal Highway Association. Did I have the right entity, Todd? Because weight restrictions with the moving of product, the supply chain issues, all of that, there's going to be pressure for that to be changed. And instead of changing it from state to state on the weight restrictions, maybe the better solution is to do it on an overall federal basis. And so that would be a way to get that done. Unfortunately, that would mean probably years, getting something done here. But I just thought that was very interesting to think it could happen on a national basis.
I think it would be a cleaner process. I agree, but I also agree that I think it would take much longer to get 50 states to agree to something. And I think that's sort of what might have been the DOT's thought process. So I'd be a little cynical, but I think our best bet is to get it into some authorization funding on the weight restrictions. Bill.
All right. Anybody else have anything to add? All right. We'll move on to item number 10, which is a report on the water trails update. Todd, I assume you're going to give us that.
Yeah, I will. We did have the bid opening on December 21st. We did not get the response that we had hoped for. Didn't receive bids on the project. We met with a variety of contractors to discuss why, and there were a few that almost pulled the trigger. They had prepared their bids and then decided that their bids were probably going to be too high, so they decided not to do that. With the feedback that we got, we decided to do some different things with how the projects were, or how the project was bid. We adjusted some of the timeframes for how long they had to work on the projects. That was a pretty minor one. The big one was how the dewatering of Scott Avenue Bridge and the dam there was being handled. That was a pretty costly item in the bid package, and they had some suggestions on how to do it differently that would save some significant money. So the design team is reviewing that. Also looking at a couple other phasing processes on the construction itself. And then some of the materials were also, especially some of the rock, were coming from quite a distance away, at least the vendors that they were finding, and it's fairly high cost. So they were looking at, is there quarries that had the product that were closer, or could we use an alternative rock that was locally sourced? So they're making those changes right now, and we'll get those back to the DOT and Federal Highway for review by the 29th, I believe, of this month. Some will happen before that, with the idea that we'll do a special letting. That was the other item. This was included in a regular DOT letting, which had about 100 projects in it. The contractors said with all the DOT projects, they just didn't have enough time to focus on this project. So we're putting it in a special letting on March 29th, to where this will be the only project in that letting. So, and it's kind of in between the DOT letting, so it gives them time to focus on this project itself. So with those changes, we hope that we'll get some responsive bids and keep this project moving forward. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Todd? So Todd, one thing that I was able to talk to Catherine is, and I know, because I've talked to some dirt movers and folks that wanted to bid on this. It's the bridge portion of it, probably the Scott Street.
Yeah.
And you know, I talked to Catherine a little bit. She had talked to Hannah, and possibly we need to be out recruiting maybe even some out-of-state bridge contractors to get this thing done, because what I've heard is the state letting out all of these bids, all these bridge projects. You know, these contractors are already going to be done for the year bidding on stuff, especially any bridge projects. The majority of them are, at least the ones that can probably handle this project. So I'm concerned about not getting any bids. And then at that point in time, you know, there's a possibility that we lose the grants if we don't have something in place, correct?
But yeah, we'd have to move pretty fast if we run into a problem with this bid. We still got some time to do another bid session, but yeah, our timeline starts getting crunched. There's a couple ways around that with Federal Highway, but it takes some work, so we'd rather not go that path. But we do have some alternatives. We are reaching out further with contractors, with some contacts out of state, as you mentioned, and talking with the ones that were interested in bidding previously to kind of keep that interest up. And a couple of them indicated so far anyway that they plan on submitting. Obviously, time will tell, but
okay,
we are recruiting contractors outside the state as well.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to hear. Anyone else have anything to add? Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Item number 11 is a report on the Economic Development District update, probably from Gunnar.
Yep.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you again. As you know, we've been working through these phases, working toward an economic development district. Happy to say that you're well through phases 1 and 2, and we're almost done with phase 3, looking forward to being operational, we think, by April 1st. One note that we have since we spoke last time is that the STEDS was adopted. We received notice on December 9th. So this is going to continue to be helpful to grant application. We also learned that it's going to need to be updated just slightly to get it on the EDA's 5-year review cycle. Iowa and Montana are lumped together for that cycle. So we'll have to do an update this coming year, but because it's so fresh, it's not going to be a heavy lift. So next steps, we are preparing the application for the EDA's partnership program grant. This is the match money for adding staff or capacity. And again, the anticipated start date for that is April 1st. This will also include a staffing plan that we have been reviewing with the EDA to make sure it's in compliance. So the way it's going to look is the MIPA will employ a senior planner, and then MIPA will also contract with the MPO for back office and admin support. The membership enrollment period is going very well. We put out letters and emails to mayors, county chairs, as well as the highest admin person per jurisdiction. And to date, we've just been responding to requests since that initial rollout. And we have, I didn't count here, but all the names on the screen are the ones we have commitments from to date. We also have several other jurisdictions that have indicated they would be likely to join. So as of today, we know of $83,000 committed toward the $87,500 needed for the first 15 months. Very confident that we'll have that match money here in the short order. And you should also be aware that we'll start making some more proactive outreach to jurisdictions that haven't joined yet here in the next few weeks. Lastly, I'll note that we continue to work with a handful of jurisdictions on potential applications, and also will note that the now official SEDS is being used in grant applications for other entities in the region. ISU, DMAC, we're both working on one, and then we recently learned of another application from United Way of Central Iowa. So that's it from me, unless I can answer any questions.
Any questions for Gunnar? All right, we will move on. Thank you, Gunnar. We'll move on to item 12, which is a report on the transload facility. Zach, are you going to do that?
Yes, thank you. So quick update on where we're at with the transload facility. Things are kind of wrapping up. We're down to the end of this project, basically. Next slide, please. So just kind of give you an idea where we're at the moment. We're expecting to have sign off from the railroads sometime in February or March. Once the railroads have signed off, the FRA will consider the project closed out. So we'll be able to start working with the FRA to do kind of our final closeout type activities, the final performance report, things of that nature. We are anticipating that our last quarterly report, we have 2 more quarterly reports to do. One of them we'll submit here in January, and then we'll probably have another one that we'll need to submit at the end of April before we do that final performance report and close out. Next slide. I got some images here to share with you. We've got a nice before image. This was back on March 9th of 2021. You can see they had just got the equipment on the ground to start moving dirt. And then we have our image from December 23rd of this year that shows you what it looks like today. So pretty amazing, really, I think, to see the amount of work and progress that has gone into this, basically over a 9-month period in 2021. Next slide.
A lot of new rail track on that they put down. I don't know if everyone can notice that from the pictures, but there's a lot of new railroad track they put down.
Yes. And if you haven't been out there, it's very well done. I know Gabe was telling me that some of the railroad people had told him that it's some of the best track that they've seen in a long time. So they did real quality work out there, which we're happy to hear. As far as the build grant goes, we've requested reimbursement to date for $10.7 million of the 11.2. So we only have $468,000 left in reimbursement. Most of this will go towards some equipment purchase costs and the project closeout. So again, we're probably going to have maybe one more reimbursement request to capture all the federal funds. And I think I've got one more slide for you on schedule. They're expecting their warehouse to go operational in February. And as I mentioned, once the railroads sign off on the site, the rail track will be considered operational as well. So we're expecting that in February and March. Project closeout will happen in March. They are going to have to wait for their formal certificate of occupancy until May. They still have to get their landscaping in to get that from the city of Des Moines. So they'll have to wait till the weather gets a little better to put that landscaping in. I know they were experiencing some challenges with the landscapers as far as getting warranties on the landscaping, just based on the quality of the soil and stuff around the site. So they are working through that, but they are anticipating that they will have that landscaping in by May and be able to get that formal certificate of occupancy. The good news is that FRA is not concerned with that. So as far as getting the project closed out with them and getting the grant closed out, that's not a concern that the FRA has. Once we do close out the grant with the FRA, we will have some ongoing reporting to do. We'll basically have an annual report that we have to submit to the FRA each year that will cover a number of different performance measures that we agreed on in the grant application. And we'll submit that report once a year for the next 3 years, basically. So once that's completed, then the project will be considered completely closed out. So yeah, very exciting. The project looks great. I know that Paul is talking about doing some kind of open house possibly in the coming months. So we'll keep you aware of that and when that happens. And I know that they're also still open to giving tours to anybody who's interested. So if you are interested in seeing the site, please let me know and I can get you in touch with Gabe or Paul to give you a tour. Other than that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Zach, thanks. Any questions? All right, we will move on to item 13 is a legislative update. Dylan, are you going to do that?
Yep, I can do that. Not a ton of an update for this time around. As you know, the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act was passed last November. Iowa DOT will be at our policy meeting next week to give a presentation about this and give a little more information about what to expect and how that money is going to flow down to the state and down to the locals and that kind of thing. One thing to note, and they'll cover this next week too, is that we're still operating under a continuing resolution through, I think, February 18th. So a lot of the increased funding that is in the bill has not actually been appropriated yet because we have to wait for that continuing resolution to pass. So just keep that in mind. There's some things that can happen right now, and there's some things that have to wait till that, till the new appropriations bill is passed. On the bottom part there, still waiting on the Build Back Better reconciliation bill. Sorry, I didn't get that other stuff deleted. I don't think there's going to be a vote next week, but still waiting on that kind of thing and all the political maneuvering happening in DC. So still waiting on that. As you know, the state legislature just convened this week, so still too early to tell if there's any transportation related bills coming out of that, but we'll start providing those updates to you in the coming months as the session is in, as the legislative session is going. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Dylan, thank you. Any questions or comments for Dylan? All right. Item number 14 is upcoming events from Gunner.
Hello again, just a handful of events to make you aware of that may be of value to you or indoor members of your staff. Coming up here, that is blocked in my screen. Later in January, hopefully you can see the dates from where you're sitting. First annual symposium. This is the Sustainable Communities Division of APA. So they're having a series of sessions on Thursday, January 13th. Thanks for doing that. Also, through the APA and other planning groups is a comprehensive planning tutorial with regards to climate change. That's coming up on Wednesday, February 2nd. I will point out that our own Allison Van Pelt will be speaking at that. Also like to make you aware that there's going to be an annual review of activities for the WMA that will be held as part of the quarterly meeting of the Greater Des Moines Council of Watershed Management Authorities. So that's at 2 p.m. on February 7th. This is being held virtually. We can get you that link if you want to email Allison directly. She can get you all the details that you would need. Also want to bring to your attention something coming up in late March, the 2022 Iowa Water Conference. That's it from me for events, unless I can answer any questions.
Gunner, thanks. Any questions or comments? All right, item 15 is the vote on the approval of the MPO Policy Committee agenda. Any questions or comments about that? If not, I would take a motion. That means
Was that
somebody's going to
somebody-
unmute themselves.
Motion. Second by Trimble.
Thank you. All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. The next item is any other items of interest that anyone has, or Todd, if you have something?
Not today, thanks.
Anybody have anything they want to add? All right, our next meeting date is February 9th, 2022 at 11:30. Hopefully things will calm down. Maybe we can start getting together instead of virtually. Everybody can sit down and be face to face if things would clear up and get better. We can only hope and pray. So this meeting's adjourned. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Take care.